I'm 18 years old, and for most of my life, I lived on a quiet farm with my parents and older brother, Ethan. Our home sat on a few acres of green land bordered by tall trees and endless fields. The kind of place where mornings smelled like hay and evenings hummed with crickets. Behind our main house, about 50 meters away, stood a small wooden chalet. That was Grandma Ruth's place. We built that chalet for her years ago, after my grandfather, Henry, insisted she should live close but still have her own space. The idea was that she'd never be lonely, and we'd always be nearby to help. My parents even arranged the paperwork so she wouldn't have to pay property taxes or holiday fees. It was our way of showing love, gratitude, and family unity. For a while, everything worked. She'd join us for dinner, bring over pies she'd baked, sit on the porch and tell stories about when she was young. She wasn't warm exactly, but she was part of the rhythm of our life. Then Grandpa Henry passed away. It was early spring. I still remember the funeral. Gray skies, damp air, and the smell of roses mixed with the earthy scent of freshly dug soil. My grandmother stood like a statue beside his grave, face hard as stone. She didn't cry. Not once. I thought maybe she was just in shock. But in the days that followed, something inside her changed. Or maybe something she'd always hidden finally surfaced. It started with little things. She stopped answering our calls. She ignored my mom when she came by to drop off groceries. The mail we left for her started disappearing, even letters addressed to us. My dad tried to reason with her, saying grief made people act strangely, but soon, it was more than grief. One day my mom came inside looking pale and shaken. She went through the mailbox again. She said softly, "Our tax letters are missing." Dad sighed, rubbing his forehead. "I'll talk to her." But talking never worked with Grandma Ruth. She'd glare through her kitchen window like a watchful hawk every time we stepped outside. Sometimes she'd even mutter under her breath, things like, "ungrateful children," or "Henry would be ashamed." And then Mom got sick. I still remember the night she told us. She sat at the kitchen table, pale under the soft yellow light, hands trembling around a cup of tea. "It's stage 2 breast cancer," she said quietly. The words hit me like a hammer. Ethan reached out and held her hand. Dad sat back, eyes glassy but silent. I didn't know what to do. I was just a kid who suddenly realized his mom might die. We all promised to help her fight. The treatment started, and so did the exhaustion. Mom lost her hair, her appetite, her energy. But she never lost her warmth. Even in pain, she smiled for us. You'd think Grandma Ruth would have softened too, maybe offered support. But instead, she turned crueler. When Mom stopped visiting, Grandma started accusing her of neglect. "She's forgotten me," she hissed one day when Dad went to check on her. "Your wife only cares about herself." Dad lost his temper that time. "She's fighting cancer, Mom. She can barely stand some days." Grandma didn't even flinch. "Excuses. She's always been lazy." That was the day I started hating her, not just for being unkind, but for choosing spite over love when we needed her most. By midsummer, I'd stopped trying to be polite. I avoided her chalet as much as possible, but she found ways to make life miserable anyway. Packages we ordered disappeared. Letters from school never arrived. Once, she even went through the shed when Dad wasn't home, claiming she was checking on her property. But the farm wasn't hers. It was ours. One afternoon, I was in the barn working on my bike when I heard a car coming down the dirt road. We rarely had visitors, and the sound made me tense. I stepped outside to look. A black sedan rolled up and parked near Grandma's chalet. A man got out, middle-aged, expensive coat, briefcase in hand. He walked straight to her door and knocked. I thought it might be something official, maybe about Grandpa's will or the taxes, so I watched for a moment, then went back inside. The next day, I found out that had been a mistake. It was early evening, the sky glowing orange and pink. I was pushing my bike into the shed when Grandma appeared from nowhere, blocking the doorway. "Why were you spying on me yesterday?" she snapped. I blinked. I wasn't spying. I just wanted to see who drove in. "We've had people stealing equipment lately." Her eyes flashed. "Don't lie to me. You were nosing around my business, you and your mother." I took a breath, trying to stay calm. "Grandma, this is our property. I have every right to check who's driving in." "That's it," her lips curled. "Your grandfather would never have allowed you to talk to me like that." I stared at her for a moment. The woman I'd known, the one who used to bake apple pies and hum old songs, was gone. "I'm not Grandpa," I said quietly, and walked away. Behind me, I heard her mutter something ugly, but I didn't turn back. A few days later, my uncle, Dad's brother Michael, came to visit. He was kind, always had been. After Grandpa's death, he'd been trying to help sort out the estate. But when he asked Grandma about the will, she exploded. "You're not my son anymore," she screamed and slammed the door in his face. Then she called the police. The officers came, confused, and after a short talk they left, shaking their heads. We all stood there in stunned silence, wondering what had happened to her. Mom tried to reason with her again, gently. "Maybe she's grieving," she said. But the next week, Grandma accused her of stealing her tax papers. We have cameras on our house, her chalet, and the sheds, so we knew it was a lie. But it didn't stop her from yelling, from poisoning every conversation. Even Ethan stopped visiting her. "She's gone too far," he muttered one night. "There's no coming back from this." Then the second uncle showed up. Mark. He hadn't visited in 7 years, not since he borrowed money from Grandpa and disappeared. But now, suddenly, he was all smiles. He spent a week helping Grandma organize her finances. And when Dad got involved, the truth came out. Mark was trying to convince her to sell the land. The irony? She couldn't. The moment she died, the land legally reverted to us. It was in the agreement Grandpa had made when we built the chalet. When Mark found out, he looked furious. "Well, if you just gave it to her, the sky's the limit," he told Dad. That was the final straw for me. They didn't care about family. They cared about money, property, and control. The next week, Grandma refused to pay the €50 she owed monthly for gas, water, and electricity, her share of the utilities. "It's my right to live here for free," she shouted when Dad brought it up. "No," he said calmly. "It's not. We agreed on that years ago. Everyone contributes something." She slammed the door in his face. From that day on, I knew there would be no peace. Not until something broke. After that night, everything between us and Grandma Ruth felt like walking on broken glass. She stopped speaking to us directly, choosing instead to send short, passive-aggressive notes taped to her front door. Things like "do not trespass" or "keep your noisy children away." We didn't even have small kids, just me and Ethan. It was like she was trying to erase us, piece by piece. My mom was still recovering from chemotherapy. Her hair was slowly starting to grow back, soft and silver like ash. But her energy was low. She spent most of her days resting or knitting by the window. I could tell the stress from Grandma's behavior was eating at her, though she tried to hide it. One evening, Dad was sitting on the porch, staring out at the fields as the sun set behind the trees. I joined him, sitting quietly. After a while, he said, "I never thought I'd have to protect my family from my own mother." There was so much sadness in his voice that I didn't know what to say. I just put a hand on his shoulder. "We'll get through it, Dad," I said. "We've already been through worse." He nodded slowly, but I could tell he didn't believe it. A week later, Grandma started something new. She began walking around our property at night. The first time I saw her, it was past midnight. I'd woken up for water and glanced out my window, and there she was, a shadow moving across the yard, her flashlight flicking on and off. She was heading toward our shed. I went outside quietly, heart pounding. "Grandma?" I called out. She froze, then swung the flashlight toward me. Her face looked twisted, harsh in the beam of light. "What are you doing following me?" she barked. "I should be asking you that," I said. "It's 1 a.m. You can't just wander around our property like this." "This is my land," she said, her voice shaking with rage. "Your father stole it from me. I have every right to be here." "It's not yours," I said firmly. "Grandpa gave it to us. You know that?" Her eyes narrowed. "You're just like your mother, lying, manipulative." Before I could reply, she turned and stormed back to her chalet, slamming the door so hard it echoed across the field. The next morning, Dad checked the cameras. She had tried to open the shed door before I caught her. Inside the shed were tools, expensive equipment, and some legal documents my father kept in a locked cabinet. It became clear she wasn't just losing her temper. She was trying to find something. A few days later, we found out what it was. Dad received a letter from the notary handling Grandpa's estate. The will was being contested by Grandma Ruth. She claimed Grandpa had promised her full ownership of the land, not just the chalet. We all sat in the living room in silence as Dad read the letter aloud. Ethan swore under his breath. Mom looked ready to cry. "She's really trying to take the farm," I said quietly. Dad put the paper down. "She's desperate. Probably Mark's idea." "Do we have proof?" Ethan asked. Dad nodded. "Yes, the contract is solid. Grandpa made sure of it. But even with proof, the stress was unbearable. Grandma began spreading rumors around the village. She told anyone who'd listen that we were thieves, that Dad had tricked Grandpa into signing away her land. Some people believed her. Old friends of hers stopped waving when they passed by. Even the postman avoided our house for a few weeks. It was like living under siege. Then, out of nowhere, Mark came back again. He drove up one morning in his fancy car, sunglasses on, grinning like he owned the place. I was feeding the chickens when I saw him. "Hey kid," he said. "Your dad home?" I didn't bother answering politely. "Yeah, what do you want this time?" He smirked. "Just family business." Inside, he tried to act charming. He brought wine and flowers for Mom, though we all knew it was fake. After a few minutes of small talk, he got to the point. "Look," he said, leaning back in his chair. "Mom's been through a lot. She just wants what's fair." "What's fair?" Dad said coldly. "Is what's already been agreed to. The chalet is hers for life, but the land stays in our name." Mark shrugged. "Why make things complicated? Just transfer it. You've got plenty of space here." "Not happening," Dad said flatly. Mark's smile vanished. "You know, it wouldn't look good if this went public. People don't like families fighting over property. Maybe you should think about that." That was when I lost it. "You don't get to threaten us," I snapped. "You disappeared for 7 years and now you show up to take what isn't yours." He turned to me, eyes cold. "Watch your mouth, kid. You don't know how this world works." Dad stood up. "The conversation's over." "Get out!" Mark left, slamming the door behind him. Later that evening, Grandma called the house phone. I picked up before Dad could. Her voice was icy. "You've made a mistake, Ryan," she said. "You and your father both. You'll regret this." I didn't answer. I just hung up. The next day, we found a note in the mailbox, the kind of note that made my stomach twist. It said, "If you think you can take everything from me, you'll be the ones who lose it all." We didn't know what she meant until the following week. We woke up to find one of the water pipes leading to her chalet had been intentionally broken, water flooding the ground, spilling toward our garden. It took Dad half a day to fix it. Later, he checked the cameras again. There she was, Grandma Ruth, walking outside at dawn with a wrench in her hand. When he confronted her, she screamed that we were framing her, that we had edited the footage to make her look bad. Her voice was so loud that a few neighbors came to check what was happening. I'll never forget the look on their faces. Confusion, pity, discomfort. Grandma was crying now, but the kind of tears that come from rage, not sadness. She accused everyone, Dad, Mom, even me, of trying to ruin her life. That night, Mom finally broke down. I found her sitting in her bedroom, shoulders shaking. "I can't live like this anymore," she whispered. "I can't keep fighting her." I sat beside her and held her hand. "You won't have to," I said. "We'll find a way to stop this." A few days later, karma started to move, slowly but surely. Grandma had always kept her own finances separate. She prided herself on being independent. But after Grandpa died, she never adjusted her accounts properly. She'd been dipping into old joint savings that were supposed to be frozen. When the bank found out, they froze all her accounts until the issue was sorted. For the first time, she couldn't pay her bills. We didn't celebrate, but there was a quiet sense of justice. She had caused so much pain, and now the walls were starting to close in, but she wasn't done yet. A week later, a social worker arrived at our door. Someone had made an anonymous report claiming we were neglecting Grandma, that she was sick, starving, and living in unsafe conditions. Mom went pale. Dad clenched his fists. We invited the social worker in, showed her the cameras, the chalet, the clean kitchen, the fully stocked fridge. The woman looked embarrassed. "It's clear she's being cared for," she said gently. "I'm sorry for the misunderstanding. We knew exactly who had made that report." That evening, Dad walked to Grandma's chalet. I watched from the window as he knocked. She opened the door but didn't invite him in. I couldn't hear what they said, but I could see the anger on both their faces. Dad pointed toward our house, then toward the cameras. Grandma shouted something, waving her hands. Finally, Dad turned and walked away. When he came inside, his expression was tired, defeated. "She doesn't see reason anymore," he said quietly. "All she has left is spite." For a while, things went quiet. Too quiet. No more letters, no yelling, no nighttime visits. We started to believe maybe she'd calmed down. Then one morning, a strange man arrived at the gate. He was dressed in a suit, holding a clipboard. "I'm here to do an inspection," he said. "Inspection for what?" Dad asked. "For the sale of this property," the man replied. My stomach dropped. "What property?" He looked confused. "This one?" "Your mother, Ruth, told me she's selling the entire estate." Dad's jaw tightened. "She doesn't own it." The man's face went pale. "Oh, I think there's been a mistake." It wasn't a mistake. Grandma had put up our land for sale online, using fake documents she'd drawn up herself. It took days to sort out. We had to call lawyers, send proof, and demand the listing be removed. By the end of the week, we were exhausted. But something had shifted inside me. I wasn't just angry anymore. I wanted justice, real justice, and I was done letting her control our lives. When my grandmother screamed at my mother that day, something inside me snapped. I didn't yell. I didn't throw things, I just stopped pretending she was family. There was no warmth left between us, just cold silence. After that fight, our home became divided by more than just a few meters of land. It was war. She stopped speaking to my mother completely. Whenever my dad or I passed her in the yard, she'd turn her face away, cigarette burning between her trembling fingers, the smell of smoke hanging like a curse in the air. Her curtains were always drawn, and every once in a while, I'd see her peeking through, watching us like we were strangers on her property instead of the other way around. Then she started her petty revenge. Our mail went missing again. Every few days, important letters never arrived. Hospital notices for my mom, tax forms for my dad, even a letter from my university. I knew she was behind it. She wanted to make our lives harder, to remind us that she still existed. But what she didn't know was that we had cameras now, not just outside, but hidden inside the mailbox post. So when the police came to question her after we filed a report, we handed them crystal clear footage, my grandmother, opening our mailbox, taking our envelopes, and walking off like nothing happened. When they confronted her, she lied, said she thought the mail was hers. But when they mentioned the tax letters and the hospital envelopes clearly labeled with our names, her face fell. The police gave her a warning, but they could tell. This was just a family feud turned ugly. After that, she became obsessed with revenge. Every morning, she'd walk out of her chalet muttering curses under her breath. Sometimes she'd crank her TV up loud at midnight just to keep my recovering mother awake. My father tried to reason with her once more, but she shouted at him that she'd rather rot in that house than talk to traitors. She didn't even come to check on my mom anymore, even though she knew how sick she had been. That hurt the most. I could forgive her for being cruel to me, but not to my mother, the woman who had spent her whole life taking care of her, paying her bills, making sure she never had to worry about a single thing. The woman she had now turned her back on. A few weeks later, my mother's health started improving. Her hair was growing back, and she smiled more. But she couldn't walk by the kitchen window without glancing at the chalet outside. That small, ugly building that had become a shadow over our home. One night, while my dad and I were watching TV, we heard a knock on the door. It was my uncle, the greedy one. The one who hadn't been around for years until he found out my grandmother had land. He looked nervous, even desperate. "Your grandmother called me," he said, avoiding my father's eyes. "She's saying she's changing her will. She wants me to help her sell the land." My father laughed, not with humor, but disbelief. "She doesn't own it," he said. "She never did. It's borrowed. She's living there for free." My uncle's face went pale. "She doesn't believe that. She says you tricked her." And then he said something that chilled me. "She wants to make sure none of you get anything when she's gone." That night, we checked our security system again. My dad wanted to make sure she wasn't trying anything reckless. We even called our lawyer to make sure all the paperwork about the land was legally airtight. It was. The chalet was hers to live in, but the ground it sat on, and everything around it, belonged to us. And that's when my father made his decision. "We'll stop paying her bills," he said calmly. "No more free gas, water, or electricity. She owes us months already. It wasn't revenge. It was just finally drawing the line." When the following month came, my grandmother received her first utility bill in years. She stormed over to our house, banging on the door and screaming so loud the neighbors came outside. My mother opened the door slowly, her scarf wrapped around her head. She didn't say a word. My grandmother shouted about how ungrateful we were, how she had raised us, how she deserved better. And my mother, in the calmest voice I've ever heard her use, said, "You raised monsters, not children. Look in the mirror." The look on my grandmother's face froze. She didn't scream again. She just turned and walked back to her chalet. Weeks passed. Winter came. We stopped hearing from her. No loud music, no shouting, no smoke in the air. Sometimes I wondered if she was okay. But then I'd remember how she had laughed when my mom was sick, how she had stolen our mail, how she had tried to tear the family apart. One day, my father went to check on her, not because he wanted to, but because it was the right thing to do. When he knocked, there was no answer. The door was locked, the windows fogged up from the cold. He called the police. When they broke the door open, she was lying on the couch, fast asleep, but not peacefully. The house was filled with cigarette smoke and cold air from a broken heater. She was alive, but barely conscious, dehydrated, and sick. They took her to the hospital, and that's when my father said something I'll never forget. She did this to herself. We didn't visit her. Not right away, we just needed space. But when she finally came home, things were different. She didn't shout anymore. She looked tired, not from sickness, but from being angry for too long. She started leaving small gifts at our doorstep. Apples from the market, a note saying thank you, once even a flower pot. My mother didn't trust her, but she didn't reject them either. She said, "Some people realize too late what they destroyed." It took months, but peace slowly returned to our house. We still don't talk to her much. There's too much pain for that. But she's quiet now. The police report, the unpaid bills, the shame from the neighbors. Maybe it finally sank in. Sometimes when I pass her chalet, she waves. I wave back, nothing more. I don't hate her anymore. I don't love her either. I just understand that not every family deserves your loyalty, especially when they weaponize it against you. My mother once told me, forgiveness isn't about them. It's about you not letting the poison stay inside. Maybe she's right. Because for the first time in years, I can walk through our yard, feel the wind, and not feel like a prisoner of my own family. Justice didn't come from revenge. It came from letting go, and finally choosing peace over pain.